Most people think of gladiators as fierce fighters who engaged in combat to the death. But did you know that most of them didn't die in the arena? In fact, many lived surprisingly long lives. So, what was it really like to be a gladiator? Welcome back to the channel! Today, we are going to learn the gritty truth about surviving as a gladiator in ancient Rome. Viewer discretion is advised for this video, as some of this video may be offensive or disturbing. We, the makers of this video, in no way support or condone the actions of the subjects featured. To start off, we have to address the elephant in the room. Yep, you heard that right. The ancient Romans really did fight to the death with swords and shields. This type of combat was called a munus, which in Latin means to amuse. Basically, these fights were meant to entertain the crowds. Now, while these fights might seem brutal to us today, they were actually pretty common in those times. You see, this type of fighting was a way for the Romans to settle disputes without having to go to court. It was also a way for slaves to earn their freedom. And even the emperors participated in these fights from time to time. One of the most famous examples was Caligula, who fought in the arena wearing a lion's skin and using a trident. But don't worry, he didn't hurt anyone. He just scared the living daylight out of them. So now that we've established that, yes, the Romans did fight to the death with swords and shields, let's talk about what it was really like to be a gladiator. For starters, not all gladiators were created equal. There were three main types. The retiarius, who fought with a net and trident. The murmillo, who fought with a sword and shield. And the secutor, who specialized in hunting down and killing the nimble but elusive reach. Each type of gladiator had its own strengths and weaknesses, and it took years of training to become a master of any one type. This training was not for the faint of heart either. It involved grueling workouts that would make even the most seasoned athletes break a sweat. To be a gladiator, you had to be strong, quick, and have a killer instinct. You also had to be able to endure pain and hardship, because life as a gladiator was not easy. You see, gladiators were often slaves or prisoners of war who were forced to fight for the amusement of the crowds. They lived in squalor and were treated like animals. Many gladiators died in the arena, but those who survived could earn their freedom and even become celebrities. Some gladiators were so popular that they had their own fan clubs and merchandise. Yes, you heard that right. The ancient Romans had gladiator merch. You can find all kinds of artifacts from Roman times that show gladiators wearing all kinds of gear, from helmets to armor to even jewelry. And all of this was done to show off their favorite gladiator. But enough about the fighting already. Let's talk about the day-to-day life of a gladiator. You might be surprised to learn that a lot of their time was spent on mundane tasks like cooking and cleaning. That's right. Being a gladiator wasn't all blood and guts. A big part of the job was taking care of your equipment. After all, your life depended on it. Now, there are a few reasons why we know so much about the everyday life of a gladiator. First off, there are written accounts from Roman historians like Suetonius and Pliny the Younger. Then there are archaeological finds from places like Pompeii and Herculaneum that give us a glimpse into the past. Finally, there are the works of art from the time period, which often depict scenes from the life of a gladiator. Together, these sources give us a pretty good idea of what it was like to live and fight as a gladiator in ancient Rome. So let us take a journey back in time and see what a typical day in the life of a gladiator was like. As the sun came up over the Colosseum, Gaius got up and started his day like any other gladiator. He trained for hours on end to make sure he was in top fighting shape. He practiced his sword skills, worked on his shield wall, and even sparred with other gladiators. But it wasn't all about the fighting. Gaius also had to take care of himself if he wanted to stay in the good graces of the crowd. So he spent time cleaning his armor, making sure his weapons were sharp, and preparing his food. When he wasn't training or taking care of himself, Gaius spent time with his fellow gladiators. They shared stories about their lives before the arena, traded tips on how to survive in the brutal world of gladiators, and even made plans for when they would finally be free. Life as a gladiator was tough, but Gaius knew he was lucky to have such a supportive group of friends. They were his family now, and he wouldn't trade them for the world. But life as a gladiator wasn't all fun and games. There were times when Gaius and his fellow gladiators had to face the cruel reality of their situation. They were slaves, and their lives were in the hands of their masters. Sometimes they were forced to fight to the death just for the amusement of the crowd. And when one of their number didn't make it out of the arena alive, Gaius and the others had to bury him and say goodbye. It was a sad part of being a gladiator, but one they all knew they had to accept if they wanted to survive. Gladiators weren't the only ones who had to deal with death. The spectators at the Colosseum also had to be prepared for the worst. It might seem shocking to us today, but death was a part of life in ancient Rome. People of all ages and social classes were killed in the arena, whether by gladiators, wild animals, or even chariots. It wasn't uncommon for people to die from being trampled or stabbed while watching a show. And when it happened, the crowds had to be prepared to clean up the mess. But the shows weren't all that dangerous. If you were just there to watch the games, you probably didn't have much to worry about. Just do you and co wandering onto the track or get too close to the action and you should be fine. Plus, there were plenty of distractions to keep you entertained during the downtime. There were vendors selling food and drink, merchants hawking their wares, and even prostitutes looking for business. So while you might have had to deal with the occasional dead body, you could always find something to take your mind off it. Now, let's talk about money. How much did it cost to be a gladiator? Well, it depended on where you got your training. If you went to one of the big fancy schools in Rome, you could expect to pay upwards of 20,000. But if you were willing to rough it out at one of the smaller schools, you could get by for around 4,000. Of course, this was just the price of admission. Once you were in the school, you had to pay for your own food, equipment, and training. And if you wanted to fight in the Colosseum, you had to pay for your own travel expenses and lodging. So being a gladiator wasn't cheap, but it didn't have to break the bank either. With careful planning and budgeting, you could make it work. Being a gladiator wasn't all about the fighting. It was also a job that required a lot of patience, discipline, and Like any profession, it took a lot of hard work and dedication to be successful. But for those who were willing to put in the effort, it could be a very rewarding experience. Gladiators had the opportunity to earn their freedom, gain fame and fortune, and even become celebrities in their own right. So while it might have been a dangerous profession, it was also one that offered a lot of upsides. It just goes to show that being a gladiator wasn't just about the fighting. It was about so much more than that. It was a way of life. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Was being a gladiator in ancient Rome worth it? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching!